Hey everybody, Matt Baker here, Baker Realty. Hey, I've been getting a lot of calls from several of our clients about their property appraisal. They've gotten their notice in the mail and they want to argue it and don't think it's accurate. And so I've been asking about comps and how to fight it and all those things. So thought I'd kind of go over a little bit about the property appraisal. And so let me jump into a few slides here. And if anything I don't cover here on the slides, feel free to shoot me an email or a text. Happy to help you out. So I got to do a quick disclaimer here. Baker Realty, nor I or any of our employees or realtors are certified property tax specialists, experts, or negotiators. Obviously, we market and buy and sell properties, but we have been through this process, either personally or have had clients go through this process that we've supported with comps. If you do plan to protest your taxes, do your own research and consider hiring a company that whose expertise is fighting appraisal values. We can't help you actually fight it, but we can certainly provide you some information to fight it. So before we jump into some of these things, I want to talk a little bit about terminology. I want to talk about market value, appraisal value, assessed value, taxable value, and replacement value. So market value is just what you would think it would be. It is the expected value if you were to sell your home on the open market. So that means if we were to list your home and negotiate with a buyer, the current value of what you think you would get for it would be market value. This does not cover off-market sales. So if you were to sell your house to your child, for example, that would not be considered market value because it's not on the open market or if it's a distress sale. So if you were going into foreclosure, that would not be considered a market value because you're being forced to sell it quickly. But market value is just regular sales on a property. Appraised value, that's the value that the county central appraisal district believes is the market value of your home as of January 1st. So that's what was sent to you in the mail is the proposed appraised value. Assessed value, this is your market value minus any caps. That would come from any caps that you have in place, usually your homestead limit. So if your property value is going up at a very high rate and your homestead home can only go up 10% a year. So your homestead assessed value may be lagging behind the market value, but the county is restricted to only going up 10% a year on your homestead if you have a claimed homestead. The next term is taxable value. This is your property value after any exceptions are applied. So once you have your assessed value, if you have any other exemptions that might apply, either a tax freeze because you're a senior, or maybe you have a disability and you have some other exemptions that would be applied to your assessed value, and that gives you your taxable value. And we're going to go through some examples. The other term I want to cover, and it doesn't really apply here, but you'll hear it and you don't want to confuse it, is replacement value. And this is the cost to actually rebuild your home if it burns down or gets destroyed by a tornado. So this is a term usually used by your insurance company and doesn't really come into play for your property tax purposes. Now, understanding how property taxes are calculated. So I want to start very basic and then work to more complex. So basically your taxable value times the tax rate of the local taxing entities will give you your tax bill. So there's two parts to that formula. So not only do you want to keep track of your taxable value, you also need to keep track of what the taxing entities that you live in, what they're doing with their tax rate, because that impacts your tax bill just as equally as your appraised value and taxable value. Here is a simplified tax bill. So if you were living inside a city, this could be what your tax bill looks like. So let's just say that your taxable value on your home is $500,000. Each of the taxing entities will have their own tax rate. So in this example, the city has 0.35%, county 0.37, ACC 0.1, and you add all that up and you get your total tax rate. And so you take your taxable value times the total tax rate, and that is your tax bill. Now, again, this is kind of oversimplified just to kind of show you how it works, and that's why I put the asterisk there. Um, but that's how you calculate it. This would be a little bit more accurate to what you would find on your tax bill. In this case, You have to not only know your taxable value and your assessed value, but you also need to know your exemption amount. And usually they put this on your bill, but you may need to check it and make sure it's accurate. So in this case, um, one thing I need to point out is not all taxing entities give exemptions for homesteads, and they don't all give exemptions for seniors, and they don't all give exemptions for um, other reasons. So you need to check with each one, and there is state law that governs this. But in this example, if you're living in a particular city with no exemption for your homestead and your taxable value is, or your assessed value is 500,000, your taxable value would also be 500,000 because there is no exemption amount for that city. And so you multiply that by the city's tax rate and you get a tax bill for the city. In this scenario, the county does have an exemption amount. And so you take the assessed value minus their exemption amount, and you get the taxable value of $455,000. And then you multiply that $455,000 times their tax rate of 37, and you get their tax bill. A lot of us are in the Austin Community College, and they have an exemption for homesteads. And so, again, you subtract that exemption from the assessed value and you get a taxable value. You multiply that times ACC's tax rate and you get their tax bill. And you do that over and over again. You do that with the school district. A lot of us are in a water improvement district or a flood control district. You have to do it for all of them. And when you add up all of those, you calculate them separately, but you get, a single tax bill. Now, there are property tax exemptions, and I'm not going to kind of go into all of those, but the most important one, especially for our clients, is the homestead. And hopefully you claim that if you're living in your house as your primary residence. So if your home is your primary residence, you got to claim that homestead. The one nice thing about that homestead exemption is your assessed value can only go up a maximum of 10% a year. And so if you happen to be in a hot neighborhood that's going up at 20% a year, this homestead will cap it at 10% a year. And so your assessed value often lags behind your true market value because of that cap. There are other property tax exemptions for 65 and older, disabled persons, disabled veterans, surviving spouses, from somebody that maybe was in the military and was deceased in combat, or somebody that died in the line of duty as a first responder. Surviving spouses can get exemptions. And there's others. You've heard of ag exemptions in the commercial world, private schools can get an exemption, churches, et cetera. So check with your county, see what applies to you. So a little bit about the history of appraised values. So in 1979, the Texas legislature created the appraisal districts in each county. And one of their primary roles is to appraise the properties and their value, and they are supposed to appraise them at market value. And they do handle other things as well. You'll see them often referred to as CADs, but it's a central appraisal district. Texas law specifies that taxes must be equal and uniform and requires each central appraisal district to determine taxable values at 100% of the market value as of January 1st of each year. And I think that's where a lot of us argue with the central appraisal districts is, did they accurately capture the market value? A lot of us would say that they overestimate them. Market value means the price that a property would sell on the open market when both the buyer and the seller seek the best price and neither is under pressure to buy or sell. So again, this wouldn't apply to a private sale, nor would it apply to a sale where the seller is distressed, going through a short sale or a foreclosure. Central appraisal districts rely on up to 3 valuation methods depending on the property type. And the one that is most commonly used is with residential is the sales comparison approach. So you use comparable sales data in the neighborhood, you apply that to your house, and you come up with a market value for your home. The other two are a cost approach. That's one that's usually used for new construction, or maybe a property that's very unique and doesn't have a lot of comparables. And then the third one that I'll just touch on is an income approach, and that's where you kind of calculate the income from a property, and that's usually used for commercial properties. So the appraised value for residential sales comparison approach, you look at recent sales of similar homes in the area to establish a baseline of the valuation of your home. And so the county is going to look at home type, size, and quality, the property size, the location, to some extent, the age of the home, and the condition of the home. And so by comparing to actual sales data, that's how they come up with the appraised value of your house. Do you want to note that the Central Appraisal District, they do not have access to all sales information because Texas is what's called a non-disclosure state. And what that means is when you buy or sell a house, the state does not have the right to know that number, nor is it reported unless the buyer or seller reports it. A lot of people do report it, and so the appraisal district will have some sales data, but more than likely, they won't have all the sales data. If you choose to protest, and you need to verify this, but I think for Williamson County and Travis County, I think the deadline to actually get your protest filed is May 15th. But check your letter and check your little local appraisal district for that. Um, Remember, you are appraising the appraised value, not necessarily the assessed value. So when you're making an argument, they're going to look at the market value, which is supposed to be the appraised value. And then the assessed value will depend on all the other factors we talked about. But that's what you're protesting is the appraised value. You want to take sales data that helps your case. So you're not obligated to take sales data that hurts your case. Find the comps that help your argument the best, and go see if you can get the true valuation of your property corrected. If you plan to argue deferred maintenance, which is a common argument, make sure you take written estimates. I know my experience has been that when I point out that there's a lot of issues with a particular house and that the price should be lowered to the other market values that are move-in ready, they don't want me to provide just a number that I'm winging it. They want to see actual estimates. So try to get professionals to give you written estimates for things that are wrong, such as the roof, or if your driveway needs replacing, or your house hasn't been painted for 10 years and it needs painting. Get written estimates of those and take those with you to help address that point. Do want to point out that the rules that the appraisal districts use are, in my opinion, different than what realtors do. So I have certainly made arguments in the past on my properties where landscaping was maybe different than some of the homes they compared them to. But I've listed some things here. Local school ratings can matter, right? You can go one block over and you're in a different elementary school with a different ranking. Conditions of neighbors' homes. So you drive up to a house and the neighbors on both sides of that house are trashed. That's going to hurt the real market value. May not necessarily be counted with the appraisal district. Settling cracks in the driveway, nearby railroad tracks. If you have railroad tracks going through your neighborhood and they're not going through the next neighborhood, well, your neighborhood's comps are going to be lower because the houses are going to be lower on the market because of the noise from the railroad. So those are things just to keep in mind when you go in and protest. Here's a couple of links for helpful information if you want to kind of jot those down. Each one of these pages has more links, so you can check out some of those and just kind of browse around. But they will explain their property taxes, their exemptions, and how to claim those exemptions. So, in conclusion, you have a limited time to protest. And again, I believe May 15th is the deadline, at least for Williamson County and Travis County. It is important to understand your terminology because if you don't, you'll get confused when you go in there and not quite understand what's going on. And go with facts. Take pictures of your house, get written quotes, go with some good comps from your neighborhood, and usually you'll get some type of adjustment and hopefully they can get your property. If they overestimate it, hopefully they'll get it down to where it needs to be because at the end of the day, the appraised value should be the current market value as of January 1st. So hopefully this is helpful to y'all. Contact me if you have questions, shoot me an email or a text, or if any of this that I talked to you about doesn't make sense, give me a holler. Hope you're doing good and we will talk to y'all later.